Hi, my name is Diane Benson. I am one of the senior high school counselors with Home Life Academy. And as Jay mentioned, we have Lonnie, who is going to be working the Q&A. Lonnie is our resident expert on just about everything. So I'm pretty sure she'll be able to help you if you have a question over there. So just want to start out by talking a little bit about kind of what we're going to cover during this webinar and give you a little bit of reassurance, I hope. So this webinar is goal-based planning to prepare for high school success. And as we go through here, I'm going to pull up our website and you're going to be able to see different planning sheets depending on what your students' goals are. Really, the credits are all the same. You know, there's still the required for English, for math, 3 science, etc. And we'll go over that. But depending on what your goals are, what the goals of your student are, you have a little bit or could have a little bit more flexibility in those categories. So I've been doing this for a long time. My son, we've been homeschooling him. He's always homeschooled since preschool, and he is in college now. I've also taught as a college instructor at a community college for about 17 years. I've taught at high school students at our homeschool co-op, where I volunteered, and have worked with a lot of high school students and parents kind of coming up on this milestone. And one of the things that sometimes I hear is that people who were very comfortable homeschooling the elementary years, maybe even the middle school years, there's just something about high school that starts to strike fear into their hearts. It is this looming thing that all of a sudden we hear the words credits, and we know that after graduation there could be college or jobs or military or trade school, and we want to get our students prepared for that. So the first thing I want to assure you before we get into some of the specifics here is that you really don't lose your flexibility in high school. Sometimes you have to record it a little bit different to make sure that it gets counted as credits, etc. But for example, if you're an unschooler, you can still unschool with high school. And we can work with you on how to list that information in Apple Core and how that translates into credits, etc. But you still have the flexibility, even in high school, to teach your student where they are and who they are. You know, I always say that we have to teach the student that God gave us. And God gave us a student gifted in certain areas, having certain interests, etc. And it's important to be able to keep those gifts in mind as we're planning what high school classes they're going to take, etc. So you do not completely lose your flexibility in high school. You can still work with the interests of your child and still create a educational experience that not only prepares them for whatever their goals are after high school, but also something that makes them enjoy learning. Because really, when we look at homeschooling overall, one of the things that I have found through the years is the most important things that you can give your child during homeschooling, or really in life, is a love of learning and to understand how to learn. So learning does not end when formal education ends. If you've ever worked in a workplace, you know that procedures change, systems change. There are training programs and education that employees have to go to. So the thing that we want to make sure our children understand is how to learn, and hopefully to enjoy that so they continue to be a lifelong learner. So one of the things about credits is, and I just want to kind of go over that term before we get in here very far. That's one of the things that sometimes worries people about high school, is all of a sudden there are credits, and what are we going to do, and how does that work? So a credit is basically when you complete a curriculum. So for example, if you're working on an Algebra 1 credit, basically when you pretty much finish the Algebra 1 curriculum that you're doing, that's a credit for Algebra 1. Most people, if they study that over the entire academic year, they might list 0.5 credit for the fall and 0.5 credit for the spring. So at the end, their student has earned a full credit for Algebra 1. if you're using traditional curriculum, most of it's going to say somewhere that this is a complete Algebra 1 course. Some of them might even say this is a full credit of Algebra 1 or English or whatever subject that you're working with. But we can still be outside of the box, and credits do not always have to be based on curriculum. So sometimes credit, if you choose to, can be based on hours. So roughly 150 hours of study is roughly 1 credit. And again, you know, if you're doing that over the whole year, you might do half a credit in the fall and half a credit in the spring. So sometimes I've used that, for example, with my son, because he had a passion, or he still does, a passion for history. So I really didn't even always use a textbook or any official curriculum when I taught him history. We might pick a topic, we might go to the library, and very honestly, if I just threw some books around, he was going to dig in and would eventually be covering more than was covered in most official curriculum for different history courses. So you can still have that flexibility to let them follow their interests. All right, so, and again, if you have any questions, there is a Q&A button at the bottom, and Lonnie is there and is going to help. And if she notices something might be helpful to everybody, then she'll let me know, and I'll talk about it a little bit too, just so everybody gets that information. So I am going to move to screen share, because a lot of the information that you need for high school and for homeschooling is available on the Home Life Academy website. So let me go to share screen here, and then I'm going to go over here. All right, so you should now be seeing the Home Life Academy website. And when you begin looking in here, one of the first things to do is to look under academics, and then you're going to click on high school. And here you're going to get the general information about homeschooling through high school. Home Life Academy offers several paths to the same destination. There are several ways to get to a high school diploma. And again, these paths or ways to get there allow you the flexibility to teach the student that God gave you, to look at their passions and who they are, maybe spend more time on certain topics and just kind of get through some others, because we all know there's some of those topics that all of us just have to get through. So with our goal-based planning, you can pick what type of path that your student is going to be on. One thing that I want to mention is that you can change this anytime. All the time, I'll talk to parents who will say, my kid wasn't going to go to high school or to college, I'm sorry, after high school, and now they're a junior and they want to. You know, so it is okay to change that. Or people who were going to go to college and now are going to go a trade path, which it can be a very good path. And right now there's a big need in that area. So it is okay to change that. We do ask that parents list what path they're using for their student in Apple Core. And the reason we do that is it just allows us counselors to be able to give you the most accurate information. So, you know, if a student is trying to get into, or their goal is to get in an Ivy League college, and they're asking me about recommendations for English, I would give them different recommendations for English than I would for a student who was going into trade school after high school. Again, we're looking at the ultimate goals and what is preparing the student for what they're going to do after high school. Let's see. We do have an early graduation, so occasionally we do have students who graduate before the age of 16, and if that is the case, you know, I typically like to talk to and get some more information, kind of talk through that process with parents. So there's some information on our website about that. Now, I clicked on goal-based planning, which is where we're going to go next for high school. And again, goals are important. You might want to look at career assessments. I also recommend that students maybe shadow people in different careers. maybe even assign them a class that is called career assessments or something like that, to give them some time to actually do research, shadow, gather information, etc. So here under this category, high school planning, we do offer excuse me, a 3-year plan. So I've seen more students use this in the last couple of years. Part of the reason I think that may have been happening is a lot of kids were just home more with COVID. A lot of activities had been canceled, so they had a little bit more time, so they put a little bit more emphasis on getting some of their high school credits done. For the regular 3-year plan, the student has to be 16 at the time of graduation. We don't offer a 2-year plan, so they do have to have 3 years of high school, and they have to have all the credits that are required for graduation. We typically recommend no more than 8 credits in an academic year and no more than 3 credits during a summer semester. And it is very easy to do the 3-year plan and stick within those guidelines. Okay, there's always exceptions, and if you think that there's, you know, some exceptions, it probably is a good idea to chat about that with your academic counselor, because we have been around and had a lot of experience over the years. So sometimes we will be able to give you some insight that maybe you're not aware of, or maybe we've dealt with another student who was in the same situation. We do recommend that the final year of high school be listed as 12th grade. So usually what people will do is they'll list their fall semester as 11th grade and then their spring semester of 12th grade when they do that 3-year plan. So that's an option. If you have any questions about that, let us know. And again, it's very doable with the 8 credits a year. We also offer a 5-year plan. The 5-year plan is for kids who need an additional year of high school. So maybe for whatever reason, you just don't feel comfortable graduating them at the end of a 4-year high school. It may be that you started them early and they're just really, really young to go to that next step after high school. Sometimes people do it so that their students have an opportunity to take some more dual enrollment courses, mature a little bit, etc. And so just keep in mind that that is an option too. We usually recommend that you save 1 or 2 required courses or required credits for that last senior year or that 5th year, so that we have that kind of like a reason why they're taking that. But we've had lots of students do the 5-year plan and haven't had any pushback from colleges. So the only thing, again, we recommend is you do list a 9, 10, 11th, and 12th grade, because we like to see, and I have found that colleges do like to see each of those years, but it is okay if one of them is listed as a fall semester and the other as a spring, so that the student can do that in those, the 3-year period. So let's go ahead and look at goal-based planning. So we have different paths here, as you can see, for goal-based planning. As a matter of fact, let me just back up here and just pop on over to graduation requirements first, because I do want to show you this chart here at the bottom. So to graduate from Home Life Academy, you need 4 English, 4 math, 3 natural science, 1 U.S. history, 2 social studies, a half a credit of personal finance, 1 PE, 0.5 health or wellness, and at least 6 electives. Now, if you're in Florida and certain states, it is recommended that you take 2 more electives. Usually a foreign language is required or needed for certain scholarships in those states. But so with the goal-based planning, this does not change. This is still the graduation requirements. What is going to change is just the recommendations that we might make to you, or the options that you have available for what math you want to take, or what types of sciences that you need to take. Okay, so I did want to make sure that everybody was clear that the graduation requirements are the same. It's just that the recommendations are different for the specific course titles that you use. And part of that is because, excuse me, If you're applying to colleges, especially four-year colleges, there's certain courses that most colleges will say they like to see on a high school transcript. So on our College 4 planning, that's what we recommend. This is what colleges expect to see. So if your student isn't going to college, you don't have to necessarily worry about what colleges expect to see, and you may branch out and do some other different course titles, etc. All right, so now let me kind of move on up, and we're going to start looking at the different paths. So the College 4 is, again, students who are going to go straight from high school to a four-year college. This is not people who are going to go to a community college. They're going straight to the four-year option. You want to emphasize to your student the importance of taking college prep classes if they're going to go to college. There needs to be a strong emphasis in writing and math and reading. So you want to make sure that those skills are pretty solid before they move on to that level. You also want to have their academics balanced. A lot of colleges will ask on their application, what else did your student do? You know, what extracurriculars, what volunteer work, etc. So you want to keep track of that. And we have a portfolio in Apple Core where you can list that stuff as well. Now, if your student is going to play sports in college, we do ask that you reach out to Crystal. She is our NCAA and sports counselor for our high school students and does a really good job of working with those students. All right, so let me move over from here. You see there's these options at the bottom where you can click on the planning sheets. Excuse me. So that's what we're going to do here. So I've already pulled that up. Make sure I've got it here. So right here, you can see the goal-based planning sheet for College 4. Okay, so this is the check off kind of sheet that we have. We have other versions of it, but this is the one that I find kind of useful to work with. If we go back and you look at the College 2, College 2 is a person who's going to go to a community college, a vocational school, they're going to go into military, etc. So we want to build a transcript that is going to meet their needs and is going to reflect what they did in high school and how they prepared for that post-high school step that they're going to be taking. So they may have some different options for math and some of the science and other courses as well. And so we also have a planning sheet for that, the goal-based planning sheet for College 2 TM. So it's a 2-year college, and it's also the trade and military path. Once again, if you look, we also have a life choice path. The life choice path is very flexible. It is for students whose goals involve going directly into work, maybe running the family business or starting their own business. So sometimes these are entrepreneurs who kind of are driven and know what they're going to do, and they're just ready to get out there and do it. So once again, if that's who your student is, you can use high school to prepare them for that. So you don't have to make them jump through hoops that maybe they're not interested in or don't relate to their goals. So if they're maybe not a math person and they're on life choice, they still do have to take 4 maths, but you're probably not going to necessarily push them to take calculus or some of those. You may actually consider maybe a business math or accounting, etc. So, and then the last category that we have is our modified. And we also have a spreadsheet for that. Where did my modified go? Here we go. So this is the modified path. And so these are students who may not be working exactly grade level, but they're still going to get a high school diploma. And we have a counselor who works specifically with students who are on a modified path. And again, a little bit more flexibility. Maybe not everything is exactly grade level. Maybe it's modified a little bit. They're still taking the same credits and they still get the same diploma at the end. But we have a counselor who will help with those if you need a little bit more help. So those are our different paths, and I'm going to be bouncing back and forth referring to those as I go through how to plan for high school. So there's a couple things to keep in mind. one, unless you just know your student is on a modified path or absolutely the college 2TM or the life path, you might want to consider starting them out on a college 4. Just because it is easier to back off that than it is to try to catch up if they're a junior and they change their mind. And freshman year in high school isn't going to necessarily, or doesn't have to be that different between those different paths. So that is something to consider. And again, you can change it as often as you want or that you feel that you need to. Another thing to keep in mind is that it's a good idea to print out whichever of these sheets you think your student is gonna need to follow and look at it. And I always think it's a good thing when you start getting to high school to pull them in and include them in the planning process, because I tell you what, I think you get more buy-in from them if they feel like they're working with you and it's their future that is being planned. I think you get a little bit more buy-in from the student, and sometimes they don't buck as much with certain classes, and they may, especially if they've helped pick the curriculum or the topics or something, there's going to be a little bit more buy-in with them. So I encourage you to get with your student who's going into high school to print out the pages of the path that they're on and just look at it and talk about it. You know, talk about what electives that they're gonna want to take. Talk about what they want to do post-high school, what that might look like, what skills and information that they might need to learn in high school to prepare them for that future. The other thing that I recommend, regardless of what path that you're on, is that you go ahead and take a little bit more of a heavier 9th grade year, and maybe even 10th, but at least 9th. So with 9th, I would probably try to get 7 or 8 credits in. I mean, certainly you can graduate with 6 credits, averaging almost 6 credits a year, and get the 22 needed for graduation plus a little. But I recommend that you kind of take as many as you feel comfortable with them taking during that freshman year, because things get harder when they get a little bit older. As they start moving into their later teenage years, it's not just school anymore. School is going to be maybe competing with a job that they have. As students start getting their driver's license and maybe getting interested, I know in one group I'm in, they call it the fumes, car fumes, and the perfumes or cologne fumes from the opposite gender. But anyway, so just kind of, this is a time when hopefully they're still a little bit more dependent on you, so they're home more, or they're able to concentrate on school more before they start having all those other competing interests. So during the freshman year, the 9th grade year, we're going to go through and talk about like what things that you might need to take every year. Obviously, since English is 4 credits required and math is 4, those you're definitely going to need to talk about every year. But what I'm going to do first is talk about the category of English and talk about different ways to do that depending on what path your student is on. Okay, so English, pretty much required every year. Very simple with course titles. I mean, you can be as simple as calling it English 9, or you might call it English 9 Literature/Composition. So you have the flexibility there to call that what you want. A standard way that we see it is the English 9, English 10, English 11, and English 12. With the English, we like to see a reading component or a literature component, and then a writing or composition component. We don't necessarily ask that you have to list the vocab and the grammar, because we just kind of assume if you're studying literature and reading, and if you're studying writing and composition, included in that is vocabulary and grammar. Now, if you want to add a separate curriculum for those, that's fine. Vocabulary and grammar don't typically get their own credit, though. It would be considered a component of the English. Now, if a student is going to college, and you can see I've got right here up the College 4 plan, we recommend that they have at least one class that focuses on literary analysis, one that focuses on world literature, one American literature, and one British literature. And of course, including the composition component with all of those, okay? So colleges expect in general that students kind of be well-rounded and have been exposed to literature from those different categories in general. You can use a curriculum. There's a lot of good curriculum out there. You might use a co-op, a tutorial. As they get older, you might do some dual enrollment courses for the English. But if they're not going to college, let me kind of jump over here. If, for example, they're going to a community college, trade or military, you have a little bit more flexibility. They still need for English. It still needs to include some literature and composition, but it doesn't have to necessarily fall into those different categories, etc. You know, I mean, they can read different stuff if they want. If they are life choice, again, reading, writing, and reading usually encompasses grammar and vocab. They need it every year, a lot of flexibility how you do that. And then with modified, you may do reading comprehension, English foundations. We just ask that with modified that you list the course title that really tells what is being done. Basically, our philosophy is we want the transcript to tell the story, to be an accurate reflection of what the student did while they were in high school. So let me go back to this and just again, you can use strict curriculum or co-ops or tutorials. Some years I did that. Some years I created my own. I did a Google search of, you know, what every high school student should read or something like that. I looked at those books with my student, had him pick out some that he was interested in, and then we went to the library for the writing component. Sometimes if it's classic literature, you can usually find free online information. Like, you remember Cliff Notes back when we were in school? Like, they're a no-no for students, but like they're really good for teachers because it gives you a summary of the information. It gives you some ideas of essay topics you could assign them. There's a new one out called Pink Monkey. It's probably not all that new, but it was new to me, that I actually used a lot as well. So, I mean, you can create your own also, following your students' interests and passions. And sometimes that's really fun too. If you have a student who hates to read and maybe they're not going to college, maybe they're more of the life choice, you can even get creative with how you do this. There's some curriculum out there called Movies as Literature. So maybe they read the book or read a book and then they watch the movie and then they write about and talk about the differences between the two. Really, I think the key with English is to help your student be culturally literate. And by that, I mean, if somebody says, oh, that couple's just like Romeo and Juliet, your student probably needs to know that, you know, they both died at the end. Or just, you know, kind of those references that get thrown out sometimes. You want your student to know what those are referring to. So certainly reading some books about that and also being able to watch some of those movies can be very helpful as well. For English, as your student progresses through the years, one thing that I found relative to the writing piece is that it was very helpful if every now and then or one semester or two, somebody else graded or grades your students' writing. Because after a while, sometimes you get to hear that, well, that's just your opinion, or, but I like it that way. And it's good for them to get somebody else to evaluate their writing. And there's some online curriculum and there's some different things you can sign up for to have somebody else actually look at your students' writing. Another thing that you might do if you want to think a little bit more out of the box is have your student do writing contests. There's a lot of different contests out there that I didn't even realize where your student could write a fiction and then article or story and then submit it, and maybe they win, or maybe it gets published in a digital magazine. And when they're doing that, you can count that as part of their writing or part of their component of English. Very honestly, my son's senior year, a good part of his English composition was essays he wrote for scholarships and for college admission. mean, he was doing them anyway. They were a lot of work. So I just called that part of his English 12. Now, if your student is on a different path, again, you have the flexibility to make this English what is important to them. So one of the recommendations I sometimes make for students who are the Life Choice Plan or the College 2 TM might be to, again, let them help pick what books they're going to read, okay? Maybe try to fit that with what they're interested in, especially if they're a reluctant reader. Another thing that you can do, instead of having them do a lot of literary analysis, maybe focus more on technical writing. So for example, could they write a manual that explains how to, you know, and you might even give them different choices, how to be a good student, or, you know, how to train your dog to do tricks or something like that, because technical writing is really important as well. You know, literary analysis is mostly important for college classes. I don't think I've ever had to do literary analysis as far as what motivated this character outside of the educational environment. And, you know, but being able to communicate in writing, to write memos, to write cover letters, to write even resumes, to explain how to do something, to write policies and procedures, that is something that is still English, and it is a skill that's very important. So that might be something that you want to focus on if your student has different goals. Another thing that is sometimes helpful is to coordinate whatever reading that you're doing in English with whatever topics of social studies that you're covering. So if you're studying, for example, US history, maybe you're going to make a lot of your novels or things that you read for English be related to US history as well. So you have, you know, the opportunity to kind of combine those things or kind of stay with a subject. It's almost like unit studies. So if you used unit studies for your kids when they were little, there's still ways to do that when you are working with older students, okay? So again, a lot of flexibility here. Depends on your students' goals. If you want help, we're here for you. We have helped so many students down all of these different paths and have feedback on what's worked, what hasn't worked, etc. So we're here to help you, and we have counselors who specialize in these different areas as well. Now let's move over and look at the math category. Well, actually, before I do that, this might be a good chance to, if, you know, anybody have any more questions on the English, this might be a good time to ask those in the Q&A that Lonnie is helping on, because we're going to go through each of these categories. IEW has some good English curriculum. Let's see, excellence in literature. There's a lot of different good curriculum out there for English. So, and Lonnie will get into some of those, but I saw a couple of those in the questions. Okay. All right. So now let's go ahead and move to math. All right. I'm going to move back over here to the College 4 sheet, first of all. So again, every student, regardless of what path they're on, they are still going to need 4 math credits. But once again, which 4 and what those courses are is going to depend on what the student's path is. If your student is college bound, most colleges are going to want to see Algebra 1, Algebra 2, Geometry, and then a lot of them will say after that a higher level math. So that might be pre-calculus, calculus, statistics, or maybe your student dual enrolls college algebra when they get to the 11th or 12th grade. So if your student's going to a 4-year college, it's a little bit more, what is expected in math is a little bit more specific with these categories. You also want to take in sequence and account. Math is sequential. So every now and then, if somebody hasn't done this in a long time, you know, a parent may forget that the student needs Algebra 2 before they start taking pre-calculus. So be mindful of that. If you're using a curriculum, most of the curriculum will say, you know, will give you information on the typical sequence. So Geometry is taken typically after Algebra 1. I get the question a lot, which is better to take geometry first or Algebra 2 first after you've done Algebra 1. Different curriculum, if you're sticking with one curriculum, they make different recommendations. What I typically see is if a student struggles a little bit in math, it may be better to do geometry before Algebra 2. And the reason is Algebra 2 is more analytical. So it kind of takes a little, so sometimes it's a brain development issue. The student the prefrontal cortex of the brain just hasn't developed yet to a degree to do the abstract thought required for Algebra 2. So sometimes giving them that year of geometry in between can be useful. If the students got it, sometimes it's useful just to keep going with the algebra while they're in that mode. So that's something that, again, if you want to talk to a counselor about, you can certainly free to contact us. Or if that's something you just want to, do a little bit of research on, you can do that too. The other thing I do want to mention is that we're seeing more and more is integrated math. So I'm seeing students who instead of having Algebra 1, Algebra 2 geometry, will cover all that material, but they will be taking curriculum that is called Integrated Math 1, Integrated Math 2, Integrated Math 3, etc. I guess I started seeing this from some of the transcripts we were getting from some private schools and also from global families. That's a little bit more how a lot of global and European countries are doing math. So I'm starting to see that trend. If that's something that works with you, that's fine as well. If you want to use the integrated math titles, really, if a student is going to college, the ACT is probably going to tell the story on their math of what they covered and how much that they learned of these different subjects. So if your student is going to two-year college, trade, or military, we recommend Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2, plus another math of your choice. I will say that sometimes I will see students who will do pre-algebra in 9th grade. So maybe if math is a little bit of a struggle for them, they'll do pre-algebra in 9th, then Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2, and round out their math like that. So pre-algebra can be used as a high school math credit when you're in 9th grade. It is not eligible for any early credits in 8th grade. So something that you want to, kind of be aware of there. The other thing, again, maybe if they want to do the Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2, and then do like a business math or an accounting, if that's where they go afterwards, that's fine also. If a student is life choice, same thing. Any 4 math credits they can take. So this is where I might see sometimes more consumer math and business math and accounting, and maybe they start out in 9th grade with a foundations or an algebra or pre-algebra. So you can kind of, again, look at the math options, but you certainly have more flexibility if they're not going straight to a college. If they're a modified, maybe it's modified basic math, maybe it's a modified math foundations course that you can do. The other thing that I want to mention for math is, let me go back to our website here, is that we also have some other math options for folks that are not on the College 4 path. So if your student is not College 4, you may want to even consider some technology courses, math for trade and technology, mathematics and the trades, technical math. Also, there is some option to do even some programming for that 4th math in your senior year. So if a student wanted to do coding or that type of stuff, they could do that as well and count that as their final math credit. Okay, so lots of flexibility really relative to math, especially the further you go away from that College 4 path. But if you're in the College 4 path and your student struggles, there's some, there's some ways to kind of work with that as well. So don't despair, because I know I do run into a lot of students who they're excellent and they just struggle in math for one reason or another. And that does not mean that they can't go to college, all right? So it may just mean that you teach math differently. Maybe everything is open note, open book. you can kind of change some things around for them to be able to get through the math. And if you need help with that, we're here for you as well. So now would probably be a good time if you have any questions. Let's see, for Lonnie on math, this might be a good time to do the math ones. All right, let's move on then. The next category that I want to talk about here on our planning sheet is the science. Home Life Academy requires 3 sciences. If your student is going straight to college for a 4-year college, we recommend labs with those, okay? Most colleges are used to seeing biology, chemistry, anatomy and physiology, or physics, and maybe a dual enrollment course. The big ones that they really like, biology, colleges want to see that. That's something very, most everybody takes. Probably want to have a chemistry or a physics. A lot of colleges are looking specifically for one of those. And then, you can always fill it out with anatomy and physiology or others that you might be interested in. It's okay to do more than 3. Okay, if you do more than 3, the extras will count as one of your elective requirements, but they're not listed as an elective on your transcript. The thing with science is really, it's tied to math. So with science, a lot of science is going to have a certain math level requirement. So for example, you shouldn't take chemistry typically before you take Algebra 1. In most cases, physics shouldn't be taken until the student is either doing or has done Algebra 2. Now, if you're looking at those curriculum for science, most of them will say what math level they expect or they require to do that. So that's something that you want to look at. Again, as you move away from the College 4 path, you have a little bit more flexibility. So for example, on the College 2 TM, we still recommend biology, but then 2 other additional sciences of your choice. Okay, again, a lot more flexibility. So sometimes I'll see students do agri-science, agricultural science. I'll see students earn a credit in botany. Sometimes I see students earn a credit in astronomy. I was afraid I said astrology for a second there. So, but any, a different science course. So this is a real good one if your student, has a passion in science and it's not one of those traditional big 3 or 4 that most high schools offer. You can chase that rabbit down its hole, and if you can't find a curriculum that teaches it, you can use the library and go read books and do research. Sometimes I've even gone to like a used bookstore and looked at college level books on a subject. So if your student is interested in botany, you may go look at a used college book on botany, but you're obviously not going to cover it at the same level, but maybe it'll give you an idea of what things to look for at the library there. So, and again, with life choice, any 3 sciences. Sometimes I have students who are traveling, maybe they're with their family on the mission field, and maybe their science will be like the animals and flora in whatever region of the world or continent that they're on. And they spend a lot of time researching and learning about that where they're living. And that is a great opportunity and is certainly something that you can use for a science credit. All right. If you have any other science questions, now might be a good time to ask those for Lonnie. Next, I'm going to go to social studies. Let me get back over to the College 4 path. All right, so for social studies with the College 4, most colleges are going to expect that the student has some understanding of world history. A lot of colleges like to see a student has some U.S. government, maybe some economics, but those are kind of the big ones that are typically looked for. A lot of the curriculum for U.S. government and economics are only half a credit. So it might be a half a credit U.S. government, a half a credit economics, and maybe a credit of world history or world geography. So at least 2 credits for social studies. I will say that social studies does include some other topics like psychology or sociology or philosophy. So those are things that you might want to consider as well. And as I mentioned earlier, sometimes it's good to coordinate whatever books your student is reading with whatever history that you're studying or social studies that you're studying. So this is the College 2 TM path. And again, we recommend a world history plus another one, okay? US history is required and that's separate, and I'll talk about that in a second. If your student is a life choice plan, any 2 social studies credits. And again, this is where you might even look at what they're interested in. Let's say they're life choice and they're planning to go to the mission field in South America. Maybe they want their social studies to be like a South American history or cultural study, etc. So you can, again, you can tailor what they're taking to what the students' ultimate goals are. So I encourage you to take that into consideration as you go here, as you go through here. All right, let's move over. That one's kind of straightforward, but I do want to mention down here under other requirements, you see that on this sheet, US history is listed separate. That's because there isn't really an option. Everybody needs to take a US history class or credit. It is required for graduation from Home Life Academy. So regardless if they're College 4, regardless if they're, let's see, the College 2 TM, if they're the life choice path, they're all going to need to have 1 credit of US history. So that's something to be aware of when you're looking at and planning high school. If your student isn't particularly interested in US history, there's other ways around that. So for example, let's say that your student really isn't interested in US history, but maybe they're interested in weapons and guns. You know, if you study weapons and guns, you know, over the last couple of centuries, they're mostly related to wars, and wars is a big part of history. So that might be a way to kind of pull them into this. If you have a student who's very interested in music, for example, maybe you study, pull in or look for a curriculum that covers American music and art. And that's going to tie in with history. You'll then start kind of looking at, okay, what maybe inspired this artist to paint this picture or write this song, and what was going on in the country at that time, and how might that have influenced it, etc. So there's other ways to kind of get to these topics if your student is resisting a little bit there. All right, so we've covered English, math, science, social studies. Let's look at the other required before we get over to electives. 1 credit, regardless of which path you're on, 1 credit of physical education. Physical education is really anything that raises the heart rate. So I have kids who bale hay for their PE credit. I have dancers who are taking dance all the time, and they're using their a dance as at least for the required 1 PE credit, and then maybe we'll list later dance classes as an elective or a performing arts. So it can be anything. They can walk the dog, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be a formal class. With PE, roughly 150 hours is 1 credit. You can do that all 1 year, or you can spread it out and do, you know, a quarter credit every year. You can decide how you want to do that for your student, but before they graduate, they need 1 credit of PE. They'll also need a half a credit of health. Health is another one that it can, you know, I mean, there are things that are typically covered in high school health courses. Basic, like how the body works, a little bit about the respiratory system. It typically covers like diseases and disease prevention and health and nutrition, you know, how to eat and exercise, wow, that's important, etc. So that's kind of the typical health. But I've also seen people and encourage some people to get that credit in different ways. So for example, if there's a major health issue going on in your family and your student is spending 1 day a week at a hospital with a sibling or another family member, and they're learning about that medical issue and how to live with it, etc., that can count as health too. So you can kind of get creative there. For my son, I included a lot of his Boy Scout stuff because Boy Scouts covers a lot of that, and then did some documentaries that we watched that, I don't know, kind of, some of them were almost scary. Makes me not want to eat meat, but anyway, so, you know, I mean, you can do those things and discuss them with your student. Now, personal finance is also half a credit. Larry Bouquet, Dave Ramsey, those are common curriculum that I see. It doesn't have to be a curriculum. It can also be, you know, parent directed or parent led. You can kind of, I don't want to say make it up yourself, but, you know, I mean, you can pull in what's important to your family and teach those. Now, this is just my little prejudice here, but I like to save health and personal finance for senior year. And you can do it anytime. HLA doesn't have any restrictions on that, but I just want you to consider that money and health means a lot more to a student when they're 18 and maybe getting ready to go off on their life as a young adult by themselves without you there, and then it maybe does to a student who's just a ninth grader, just a freshman in high school. So I saved those. We really covered them all the time because it was part of our family lifestyle, but I didn't give my son the credit for them until his senior year, so that we had that one last kind of opportunity to sit down and say, hey, let's talk about what we value as a family and how we spend money and how this is gonna, you know, impact you as you go out as a young man in the world. And, you know, just before he went to college, I wanted to remind him to eat salads on occasion. So, you know, just things, you know, that right at the end that you might want to share with your student. All right, so now let's move over to the electives category. If the student, and I'm on the College 4 page, if they're going straight to a 4-year college, what you'll find is a lot of colleges want to see a foreign language. So we do recommend that the student have 2 credits of the same language during high school. All right. And it can be, you know, French, Spanish, German, you know, whatever they want to do. We do recommend that the student have 1 performing arts credit. It could be either in drama or music, or it could even be like an art history, music appreciation, etc. And a lot of colleges do like to see some sort of computer credit. And it may even be just making sure that they understand how to use computer applications. For example, how to use Word documents and do Excel spreadsheets or some sort of spreadsheet to collect data, manipulate data, etc. So those are the kind of the extras that the College 4 students probably want to take: the foreign language, performing arts, and a computer. And then the other credits for electives can be really whatever they want. So if they have a passion, for example, on science, maybe they take science every year, and one of those sciences would count towards their elective requirement. This is also a chance for them in the electives category to explore something maybe beyond their comfort zone. So maybe you encourage them to, I don't know, to participate in something different or new. Maybe they do debate or speech or, you know, even a survival, you know, how do you survive, or emergency management. I mean, it can be really whatever your student is interested in doing. I know my student got this, I don't want to say a weird interest because he might watch this someday, but he was interested in flags from different countries and all that. And evidently that's called vexillology. And there is a group, a global group that sends out newsletters and all that. And so he did spend time on that. And so he has this weird, odd elective credit called vexillology, and that was his flags credit. So if your student is on the College 2 path for their electives, it can just be any 6 electives, okay? And so this again is a chance for them to maybe pursue their interests based on their goals, based on what they might be studying after high school. This is what you want to do here for the electives. If you have trouble coming up with electives for your student, feel free to reach out. Because usually when I have that discussion with parents, I'll start asking, what does your student do in their free time? And it's like, well, they volunteer, or they sing at church, or they play the guitar a lot. And I'm like, ding, 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 those are good electives. Let's like start talking about how to list those as electives. So, you know, whatever your student is doing, kind of watch that and see if it can't be something that you can use as an elective. And then again, for the life choice and other paths, again, whatever your student is interested in, that will be something that you can use as an elective. And we do have some. Let me get back here and see what page I have this on. My electives. So here is a list of electives, just ideas for electives. Again, the foreign language, arts, any of those, business courses, marketing, video editing, computer graphics, journalism. For other students, this would be maybe their Bible history, world religions, life skills, home economics, childcare, auto mechanics, woodworking. So there is a lot of opportunities for the student to learn real life skills in their electives as well. And that can be really important also if that, you know, fits with their goals. So let's see. One thing I do want to mention about foreign languages is a lot of colleges require that. So if your student knows what college they're interested in, you might look at their programs. So for example, just as my little story. So my son dual enrolled German. So he dual enrolled 3 German classes, and we were like, oh, yay. We weren't really paying attention to the college. We were like, yay, he's getting his language in. And then he went to a college that actually requires 4 semesters of a foreign language. And the college he was at does not offer German. So he had 3 credits that transferred in as German, but then the college he went to doesn't have German. So he has 1 more that he has to satisfy and kind of has to get a little creative with that. So, you know, depending on how important that is to you, that might be something that you look at as well. If you're on the college track, most colleges will list on their website exactly what they want to see in high school. So it isn't something that needs to be shrouded in mystery. It's on most of their websites. So it can kind of give you an idea or help you plan that list. If your student is going to a technical school, I encourage you to reach out to them and talk to them. Sometimes they have information that can, you know, kind of help your student know how to prepare for that next step, or how much maybe math they really need, or even things that they can do at home to get them ready for that trade program. And then, of course, you know, related to if they're entrepreneurs or other plans, you can kind of be aware of that as you're planning here also. Let's see. A couple of other things I just wanted to mention is, I'm going to go over here to a website on dual enrollment. In Tennessee and in a lot of states, we have a dual enrollment grant. Oops, I'm a little slow here. I'm not sure what's happening on that page. I may have too much opened. Let me go back over here and close this one. Sorry about that. So if you have a dual enrollment grant, or if your student wants to start earning some college credits while in high school, that is a really good thing to do as well. I do encourage you to make sure that they're ready for that, if that's what they're going to do, because those are more permanent, especially if they're going on to college. So for example, almost at the end of every semester, I will have at least one parent who will call me and say, my student was in dual enrollment all semester, and I didn't know till today that they failed their course. And it may be that the student didn't understand something. I had one student who thought she had dropped the class because she stopped attending, but of course that's not how it officially works in college. So sometimes it's just understanding those things. that are different for students when they're in the younger ages. So make sure that they're ready if you decide to do that. But we do have, if you just do a search for dual enrollment, we do have a lot of information on our website that kind of gives you some ideas of how to go about that, the steps, what you need to do, forms that you might need to complete as well. Another thing to keep in mind is that unless maybe you're going to doing your dual enrollment at a Christian school, the material that they cover is sometimes very adult. So even though your child may be able to read at a college level, you know, you got to think, do you want to emotionally put some of those topics on their heart at a young age, or do you want to let them grow up a little bit before that? So just something to kind of keep in mind. The other thing that I wanted to mention was the Tennessee scholarship programs. If you're here in Tennessee, if you're in Florida or another state, they might be different. But if you're here in Tennessee, we have the Tennessee Promise, and we have the Tennessee Hope Scholarship. And there have been some changes in those this year. So you definitely want to check out that information on our website. And you can just do a search for Tennessee scholarships to get that information. All right, let me unscreen share here for a second. Here we go. All right, I just stopped the screen share there so I could come over and see if there's anything else that we want to talk about today. I think Lonnie has been covering the Q&A. So let's see if there's any there that it looks like we want to talk about. Let's see. So I've got one who has a student who took Latin 1 in 8th grade as a credit course and is now taking Latin 2 in 10th grade. Does that cover her, or will she need a second foreign language during high school? And so we do have some option for some early credits in 8th grade. We recommend that you take no more than 3 early high school credits in 8th grade. Do not take English as an early credit because colleges want to see that every year, but you can start your foreign language, and most colleges are fine with that, but you just always want to get their final word on that there at the end. Every now and then there's a college that's fickle and just wants to see them all in the 9th through 12th grade. But it's not that often that you run into that. So there should be a lot of flexibility there. The Tennessee Scholars information, it does not have to be turned in every year, but Katie is our coordinator for that, Katie at homelifeacademy.com, and she is who you would contact for that. Volunteer hours are not required by Home Life Academy for graduation. We do, however, have in Apple Core, there is a portfolio where you can list extracurricular activities, volunteer work, jobs, and awards. And that is very good to use. So I put all my son's stuff there, and I do think that that made a big difference with scholarships. So when we sent his transcript, we would just, when we made the transcript request through the request manager, and this is all senior year stuff, and we do have a webinar where we just talk about seniors and juniors, so some of this may not apply to you, but I sent the portfolio along with his transcript to colleges, and the portfolio included awards, volunteer work, and all of that stuff. So that's a good place to report that and have a record of that. If you do that, I encourage you to do that from the very beginning because it is stuff you think you'll never forget. All of a sudden you're like, was that 2 years ago or was it last year? It can get all muddled in your brain. So it's important to be able, to have that information accurately recorded as well. Let's see, how do we contact a counselor? So to contact a counselor, there's a couple things. So you could go to our website and just the homelifeacademy.com, and there is a live chat button, and you could just click there and ask about, which counselor that you should need to be connected with. We do, we overlap, and we also have some specialties. You can email the counselor directly, just their first name, Margie, M-A-R-G-I-E, at homelifeacademy.com is the 9th grade counselor. Jennifer, Jennifer, at homelifeacademy.com is the 10th grade. Marta, M-A-R-T-A, is the 11th grade, and Mona is the 12th grade. You're also welcome to email me. My email is Diane, D-I-A-N-E, at homelifeacademy.com. And if I can't help you, I can get you to the right person who is maybe has specialty in the area of the questions that you are asking. All right. Other questions? I feel like it's a whole lot to cover, and I could honestly talk another hour just about different ways to do this, etc. But really what I wanted to do in today's webinar was make sure that you knew about the planning sheets, that those resources were there, and that the freedom that you have to still be flexible in high school. You know, some of the things that can happen in high school is you get so excited about maybe what is coming next that you forget that these might be your last years with your child. And so I encourage you not to forget that. I mean, if your student is very driven and wants to do dual enrollment and do all this extra stuff, I think that's, you know, if they're driving it, that's probably, you know, where their passion and where they're being led. But you might want to step back and also kind of recognize that these last years in high school are your last time to kind of look out the window and say, it's a beautiful day today. Let's run up to the mountains. Or, you know, you've been working hard all week. Let's just bug out for a while and go get an ice cream cone. And it's also an opportunity to have those discussions with your student before they, again, move on beyond high school, where you can, when you're reading books or watching TV, or even just, you know, noticing other people's lives and what issues they're dealing with, where you can talk to your student about, what do you think about that? Or how would you respond in that situation? Or, you know, let's talk about ways to deal with conflict, or ways to deal with a situation where you're not clear on what's expected. So, so I just encourage you to spend some time. You know, those are some good years, and it gets harder and harder as they start kind of moving on to their own life. Can you tell, like, I'm empty nest now, my kid's gone to college, and and it's sad sometimes, but it's also good when you see that you have launched them on a path, especially when you feel like that is where God is leading them. And also kind of moving on those last year of high school to kind of let them be more and more responsible for their assignments, for getting things done, for taking care of things that need to be taken care of, so that you're not always, you know, having to do that or feeling like they can't do those things without you. All right, I have a question. Can I give speech and debate classes? Can I credit speech and debate classes for English and U.S. government? Yes, let me think here. Yeah, I mean, we do recommend for English that there be some sort of literature or book, not just research necessarily that you would do with speech and debate. But you can do that. You can also list those as an elective. I know for my son, it kind of overlapped a little. I mean, you know, he was doing what I considered English, but he did so much for like his speech and debate that, you know, I considered part of that his English, because he was writing for that as well too. So, so there's flexibility there. All right, so I'm going to wrap this up. I hope you all got some question answered here. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We are here, between us counselors, we have many, many years of experience. We've worked with students in all sorts of situations, and we're here to help you, so you're not in this alone, even as you start to approach the high school years. So this is Home Life Academy signing out. Bye-bye.